Welcome to another episode of A to Z Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Angela Brandenburg, A to Z Angela. Today's show is again sponsored by Fox Valley Technical College at the Venture Center. For more information about entrepreneurship programs, their eSeed Proceed course, please check out Fox Valley Technical College. I'll be hosting the Dream Workshop, the A to Z Dream Workshop, there for National Entrepreneurship Week in February of next year, 2022. So today on the show, I am so excited to welcome my very special guest, Steven Shapiro, author and creator of Personality Poker. Thanks for being here, Steven.
Hey, Angela, it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So I was just talking to Steven a little bit more. I've been a fan of his work and personality poker since 2009 when I was really getting into the meat and potatoes and creating the Dream Workshop, and telling him how I used to teach personality types using the animals from a life map course that I took. And the personality types were defined by the lion, the otter, the beaver, and the golden retriever. And when I started creating the Dream Workshop, I knew that, as I mentioned in other podcasts and stories, that I couldn't do a sports theme or anything else because I'm so short, I could never play sports. So poker and playing the game of life seemed to be very fitting. So what happened was I started trying to create personality types and suits according to the suits of cards myself. And lo and behold, I was in Barnes and Noble one day and I literally almost fainted when I saw the book Personality Poker by Steven Shapiro. So I started researching. I started loving this concept because he had went and done and way above and beyond anything I had ever dreamed that it would be. He created personality poker using the four suits. So Stephen, can I just have you tell your story of how this all came about? First of all, tell me a little bit about you are a world traveler, corporate trainer. You specialize in innovation for different companies. Tell me a little bit about your story, what you're doing, and how this all came about.
Sure. So I think that the key, Angela, is that I am an innovation person, first and foremost. That's what I do. And uh, during my career, back in the mid 90s, I was leading a 20,000 person innovation practice at Accenture, a big management consulting firm. And one of the things that I originally assumed during my early work around innovation is that there are some people who are innovative and then there's everyone else. And what I began to realize is that's not true. Innovation requires people from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different strengths. And so I started to look at it and realize, well, there are four key steps to the innovation process. And each of those steps actually require different sets of skills and behaviors. And so that was the initial version of it. Started off as a spreadsheet in the very beginning. And then one day I was playing blackjack at the Venetian in Las Vegas. And I'm like, oh, wait a second, there are four steps to the innovation process. Well, there's four suits and a deck of cards. And so I went back and I took the words that were in my spreadsheet and I started writing them with a Sharpie on decks of cards, started playing around with them. And I realized, well, not only do the suits have meaning, but the colors have meaning. The numbers have meaning. And so as time went on, this evolved. And so the version of the cards that are out now is definitely very different than the original version because we've added new perspectives, we validated more words, to make sure that everything really does fit with the model that we're trying to create. So that's pretty much how it came about, was just recognizing that everybody contributes to innovation. In fact, one of the mistakes people make with innovation is that they surround themselves with people who are similar to how they see themselves, how they see the world. And when you surround yourself with people who are similar to you, that kills innovation. We need divergent points of view. So that's sort of the brief history of the cards.
It's an amazing story. I've been inspired in Las Vegas myself from time to time. Um, in fact, after getting the personality types down, I created Risk and Reflection Blackjack for the second part of the Dream Workshop. And the entrepreneurship part, we built the House of Cards. So I just think it's such a cool, it's so cool. Because so many things can come out of those four suits and the the opposites attract was one thing that just really, you stick out. You in your presentations, you talk a lot about it. Do opposites attract, Stephen?
The answer is no. Actually, they detract. And that's the thing is we hear this expression opposites attract, and they might have an initial spark because we're slightly interested in people who are different than we are. But when it comes to being with people on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis, working with them, we find people who don't think the way we think annoying. So it's like we want to create these teams with divergent points of view, but the reality is we're not wired as human beings to do that. We want to surround ourselves with people who are similar to us.
So, what would you give as advice? Like in the workshops, you talk about finding that opposite person. So, you created a team and they're visionaries and dysfunctional. They put the fun in function in dysfunctional, right? We have some diamonds, some hearts, and yet, if you have a leader that's maybe running a company like that, I mean, would you put who would you give them? You talked about this in your partnerships as well. So you had two people that really got along well, but did you get things done?
Well, so what you're referring to is actually a personal story of mine. When I was at Accenture, uh, I had a $30 million budget for this one initiative that we were running. And I thought, pretty big budget, I want a co-leader. And so I got this guy, John, who is this big, jolly, happy guy. And John and I got along incredibly well. And although I didn't have personality poker back then, John and I were basically the same. We were both diamonds and hearts primarily. I had a little more spade in me. I'm a little more skeptical than he was, but he was like this happy guy. And so when we were running this project, there were three things that you could say at the end of this project. The first thing is that we developed a lot of new, innovative, creative ideas, which are the diamonds. The diamonds are the creative, lots of ideas. Doesn't mean they get implemented, doesn't mean they're good, but lots of ideas. The second thing I could say is everybody on the project had fun. And that was the heart in us coming out. We wanted to make sure people were having a good time. But the third thing I could say is that it was a big waste of $30 million because we were so focused on novelty and fun that we forgot we needed to implement something of value. And so moving forward, pretty much, that was really the biggest epiphany for me, was when you create teams, you need to create teams where people complement you. And that's not with an I, that's with an E, that you have people you surround yourselves with who are different. So my primary thing is I like ideas, I like novelty, I like chasing bright, shiny objects. So the first person I always need to bring onto my team is what we call a club. And a club is the person who plans the work, works the plan. They're maybe a little anal retentive. They've got these timelines, these deadlines, these goals, these objectives. And these people drive me absolutely bonkers. When I work with them, I feel like they're suffocating me. But I've learned that I need them. And that to me is really the key point, is diversity of personality, or diversity in general, is not about bringing together people who are different. It is about bringing people together who are different and having a deep appreciation for what each person contributes and understanding how each person contributes specifically. And when we deconstruct this model, you can create a very, very high performing team that has divergent points of view. But bringing a bunch of people together who think differently without giving them the skills, the tools, and the methods to be able to do this actually creates a lot of dysfunction and actually leads to a very negative team effect.
One of the teams you reference in the book, Stephen, and I think my husband would just shake his head if I didn't ask about this, is right off the cuff. You talk about working with Formula One racing teams and how much you were able to connect them together and help them understand so that they could work efficiently but innovatively. And I mean, just tell me your whole story. Don't leave anything out at this point, because he watches Formula One every week. And what was that like? Who was the coolest race car driver you got to meet in all of that? I mean, tell me about that part of your life.
So, and to be clear, my work with the Formula One team, I was not making them a better team. We did a lot of technology work and a lot of manufacturing productivity work. But while I was there, I got to really watch and observe and see how they do things. So this was back in the late 90s into the early 2000s. I lived in the US until 1999 when I moved to London. And at that time, we were the sponsor of one of the Formula One teams. And as part of that, we gave them money, but also in addition to giving them cash, we did some consulting work. And that's really where I was involved, was on the consulting work side of things. And so again, my work there wasn't necessarily related to personality poker or even innovation. My work there was, again, about manufacturing productivity and technology, but watching the way they work, especially the pit crews. I love watching the pit crews. And if you watch a pit crew, the reason why they can do what they do as fast as they do it, I won't get into all the details, but one of the things is they really do break down the work, and each person does what they do best. So basically they figure out what everybody's great at, and then they divide up the work, and then they make sure they can work together efficiently as a team. And that's essentially the premise of personality poker, is each person needs to play to their strong suit, do what you do best. You need to then play with a full deck, which means you can't just have people who are the same as you are. You need to surround yourself with people with different perspectives. And then you have to deal out the work. Each person has to know how they contribute, but we need to be able to pull it all together and shuffle the deck and make it all work together. So those are the 4 key principles of personality poker. To me, I got inspired watching the pit crews as to how they actually deconstruct that work.
Very cool to know they were there in the beginning stages of when you were just starting to think about how it all works. They were the team, one of the teams that inspired you. Very cool. So this started going. Tell me a little bit about the timeline. So again, this was, or you were in London, you created it because you were in Vegas. Tell me once, because when I was teaching the workshop, I wanted to reach out to you in 2009, 2010, and say, like, Steven, I'd love to incorporate this into my workshop, and that wasn't quite your plan at that time. When I had started coming back around, I couldn't wait to make this call and make this connection with you. And lo and behold, you had trained other trainers or offered the opportunity for anybody to train in this program so that it could impact more lives, more companies around the world. So tell me, how did you get, that's a little bit of a snapshot from A to Z there, but how did all of that come into fruition?
Sure. So again, the initial concept of personality poker started actually in the mid 90s when I was working with, trying to create this $30 million project that failed. And I started to have these realizations that we need to bring different people together. And then I watched the Pit Crew, which was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then personality poker was born around 2005 when I mapped them all to poker cards. And at that point, my belief is what you do is anytime you're testing a new concept, you don't invest a ton of money. And so instead of going to print cards off, the first thing I did was actually decks of cards and writing words with Sharpies on decks of cards, playing with those till I felt like I was in the right direction. Then what I did was I found some card templates online, and I just printed them up on cardstock at what was then Kinko's, it's now FedEx Print. And they would actually cut the cards for me and stack them up. So I'd have 52 white cardboard stock, really terrible looking cards, but they worked. They got to know me pretty well because anytime one of my jobs was coming in, they're like, oh, here's the guy with the poker cards. And I would start to use these in speeches. And so what would happen is these were not exactly high quality, but my plan was once I did enough runs of it and tested the words and make sure everything was working, then I would go to an actual print run. And one of the events that I was actually the last event that I planned on using these cardboard versions of the cards, somebody came up to me afterwards and said, I want to buy the cards because I want to use it with my team. And I said, they're not for sale. I don't even have cards yet. And I certainly don't have an instruction manual. And like, well, but we want it. And, can you just get us some? So sent them some decks of cards, no instruction manuals, no nothing. And they were able to do some really cool things. They came up with some ideas that I hadn't even considered while they were playing the personality poker. So that was really the deal was I'll give you the cards because you're the first person to ask, but I want you to tell me what worked, what didn't work, what do you need more information on, and what did you find that was maybe a new insight. And then from there, we started printing cards and selling cards. And then over time, I started adding more materials, video training libraries, and PowerPoint slides, and templates and things of that nature. So that's been the evolution. The book came out in 2010. And then from there, I started, basically spinning off more product from that. So that's sort of the general genesis of it. But in general, my thought is always start small, try things out, test them out, and let the market tell you whether it's a great idea. I know some people get an idea and then they spend thousands of dollars printing cards, let's say, and nobody wants them. And the nice thing with my model was I was always doing, in the early days, smaller print runs, 100 decks, and it went to thousands of decks, and it went to 50,000 decks. And so we, basically scaled up over time with the printing of the cards.
Now this started, you're based out of Florida now, but you've lived around the world. You've taught personality poker around the world. Can you tell us, where has it been? How many have you touched in your audiences with personality poker? And then you've gone beyond personality poker into further innovation trainings as well. So tell me a little bit more about, just how many lives have you helped to inspire innovation in a new way?
Yeah, so to be clear, I've been an innovation person, not a personality poker person. So innovation is really where I started in the mid 90s. And that was in response to work I was doing prior to that, which was around business optimization. One of the things I found was that when you optimize a company's processes, they downsize the workforce. And I just didn't like that. So in 1995, I decided I want to help companies grow. And innovation wasn't really a term that was widely used at that point, but I thought this is what I'd like to do, is find a way to help companies grow, created this practice at Accenture. And so that's really where I've focused my energies for the past 25 years, is on growth strategies, innovation, and collaboration, things of that nature. So personality poker is just sort of a slice of that, but most of my work is really on how do you create a culture of innovation. And I would say, certainly well over 1 million people over the course of time, probably more than that. I don't really keep track of that. I would say with personality poker, it's probably closer to 100,000 people have played personality poker at one time or another. Again, it's sometimes hard to know because you sell decks of cards and people play it multiple times, but that's probably my best guesstimate, is 100,000 people have played personality poker. And we know we've counted at least 23 countries where it's been played. I'm certain there's a lot more than that.
And one thing that came up in the trainings, you had a video where you were doing it overseas and it was translated into other languages. How exciting was that for you to get that big compliment that, hey, we want you to, again, teach this around the world, and we're going to translate your products into other languages?
Yeah, that's been fun. So I think the first translation we had was Danish, and that's partly because of good friends of mine loved personality poker, and it complemented the work they were doing around happiness at work. And so we created a Danish version, and then that led to a Dutch version, and then we have a Chinese version. And now we actually have, although the cards are not translated, we have the words translated into, I think it's like 10 different languages. So even though we might not have the cards, what we've done, I've done it in countries like in Norway where we didn't have a translation. So on the screen, as we were playing personality poker, there were some words that most people would understand, but there were some that they wouldn't. And so we actually had the translations of the 10 or 15 most complicated words on the screen. So now we have that as something which people can use, is to translate the words that most people won't understand, so that as they're playing, now you can use it in even more countries than we had before.
That's amazing. I am just, again, blown away by something that, here I was kind of on to what you already were, ahead of the game in, and seeing, that this could be something. Personality type teachers. I know a friend of mine who's a consultant I've had on the show that trains in Myers-Briggs was just, she loved this concept. And again, what's different here about this game of personality poker is it's not just a test and an individual thing. You get people to get involved and interact and play the game with one another. So it's not just, hey, how you see yourself, but tell us a little bit more about what's the results when you're getting feedback from other people and it's an interactive game.
Sure. So actually, I have a few just random cards, and I'm using the old version of the cards that you have from the book, just because that's the version that you know. And I just wanted to show people, so you've got like, there's my favorite card, the three of clubs, the anal retentive card. But you've also got, this is personally for me, one that I like, the two of diamonds, which is the scattered card. The most frequently gifted card, the four of clubs, is the bossy card. And but then we've got nicer words. We've got like the diplomatic card. So there's 52 cards actually in the new decks of cards that we sell. There's actually 56 cards, but each of those cards have a suit, the color, the number, and a word that describes a behavioral attribute. And so what we do is we will take decks of cards. Imagine a room with 100 people. And what we'll do is we'll shuffle up enough decks of cards so that we will deal 5 random cards to every person in the room. And so the first thing we do is say, look at the 5 cards and sort them from most like you to least like you. And we go through a little bit more on that because like some people want to be a particular way, or some people are different at home or work. So I give them a little more background, but I say, sort the cards from most like you to least like you. And then what we do is say, okay, the cards that are not how you see yourself, we're going to give you an opportunity to trade with other people. And at that point, we'll put on some music in the room. I sometimes like Lady Gaga's poker face. Everybody stands up and they start trading. And so let's just say, for the sake of argument, I had, what would be a good card that doesn't describe me? Okay, so let's say I had the overachiever card and I decided that was not me. I would walk around the room holding up that card, saying, okay, anybody want to trade an overachiever card for a card that you have in your hand? And if somebody had the scattered card, for example, they'd be like, oh, yeah, I that's a good trade. And so we would trade cards. And the goal is to get 5 cards that best describe how you see yourself. Now, usually after doing this for about 5 or 6 minutes, some people will have some cards that just still don't describe how they see themselves. So we do a second round of trading, and this is where it gets fun. We will take decks of cards and we will throw them all over the floor. It's basically like a game of 52 card pickup on steroids. And there's cards everywhere on the floor. And what we'll do is we'll have people improve their hand. So if there's a card they don't like, they drop it down on the ground and they pick up a card that replaces it. Again, the goal is to get 5 cards how they see themselves. But the really fun part is while they're looking at the cards, I say, if there is a word that describes somebody you know in this room, pick it up and give that card to someone else. Because now you get an opportunity not just to see how you see yourself, but you get to see how you are perceived by others. And sometimes when we have time, we dig a little deeper into what does that mean when people see us differently than we see ourselves. There's some interesting research around that. So that to me is really the fun part of personality poker, is the dynamic, interactive exchange of cards, the gifting of cards, the improvement of your hands. People, and I've done this with 1,000 people in a ballroom in Vegas. So, we can do this with groups of any size. And it's just fun, and it's high energy, and people leave really excited. And then there's times we have people move around the room so we can actually get a snapshot of who's in the room based on their personality. Just so much fun.
It's amazing. I'm really excited to be introducing this officially into the Dream Workshop in 2022 as the official personality type program we'll be having and hosting moving forward. And this kicks off the day. This kicks off as we move through what dream means, which is discover passions, realize entrepreneurial abilities, and manifest your destiny. I always felt like, to me, when the Dream Workshop, when the vision for my career was really coming into fold, I was transitioning from a real estate agent into a educational consultant and speaker and trainer at conferences. And to me, discovering the passions was step one in knowing yourself, but also through the affirmation of personality type tests and passion assessments. That's when it was like, yes, my vision here, my dream became so clear, is once you're kind of grounded in what you're good at, what you're passionate about. So I really feel that this program is just going to take on and just an amazing new um, and like, innovative way for young adults, because my target audience here for the Dream Workshop Workshop is on college campuses, and now we're introducing it at the high school level. You've done this mainly with people in the workplace, seasoned adults. Have you ever done this with college age students or younger?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I did an event. It was a private high school, and it was 350 people in the audience. It was the entire student body, plus the teachers, plus the parents. And it was just so much fun. First of all, what was really cool is I had one teacher come up to me afterwards and say that there was one student in particular that was always really difficult to work with. And after doing personality poker, she understood that student differently and understood why her teaching method wasn't working. And so it was just really insightful. The kids loved it. They're running. I mean, trying to get them to stop playing was the tough part because they just wanted to play the game. They were less interested in the results of it. So that it works at almost any age level as long as you understand the words. I even had the person who was the editor of the book. He played it with his kid, a young child. Now, some of the words, his kid didn't understand, so he would have to explain what the word meant, but they still had a great time talking about, what it is, how do you see yourself? And I want to build on something that you said earlier, because I think this is an important point is, although a lot of times in business, we'll use the word strengths, really what this is these are about innate, I'll use your word, they're sort of like passions. They're things that you really love, because there's a difference between being good at something and something which you're good at that gives you energy. And so if you look at the types of behaviors that people have, in some cases, we learn to become good at certain things in order to be successful. So they aren't necessarily your strong suit. The way I would describe it, a strong suit is something which you do well, it comes naturally, and it gives you energy. So if you were to look at how you really operate, a lot of times that will give you some insights. And so it's just a really great way to have a conversation. If nothing else, put aside the analysis that comes after you play the game. To me, the most valuable part of it is, especially if you're playing with a few people who know each other, is having a discussion. I might give you a card, Angela, and you will say, wow, that's interesting. Why'd you give me that card? And I will tell you, well, when we worked together, this is how you were. And you'll be like, I didn't know that. Or I've done this with groups where I can actually help people understand why there's conflict and the way they work together. Sometimes those small groups are where the real value comes from, because it's a great catalyst for a conversation.
Absolutely. And just going back to that teacher and relating to that student, in one of the trainings, I love how you recognized that, there's leadership in the workplace, and how do you motivate your team? And when you can't do it in a one size fits all motivation. What works for one person and what really drives them is going to be different for another person. This could be based on their personality type, their innovation style. It could be based on a generational thing. Um, but what are some of the ways that you suggest, according to the personality types, what have you seen be successful in motivation?
Well, I think the key with motivation is to understand what people value. And that's really, in some respects, what the cards get at is what is valued. And I want to come back to that maybe a little later to talk about how can we look at the culture of an organization through the lens of personality poker. But it's like, what do we value? And so, for example, I value as primarily a diamond. I like being acknowledged for my novelty, for my being different, for thinking differently than other people, for being able to see things maybe that other people don't see. And so if I'm running a session and people come up to me after and said, oh, that was a fantastic session. We started on time, we ended on time, and every single agenda item, you covered everything exactly that we said we were going to talk about, and we did exactly what we said we were going to do. I'll be like, that's the absolute worst feedback I could get. If somebody said to me, Steve, look, you started late, you ended even later, and you were all over the map, and we didn't cover half the things we were supposed to cover. We covered a lot of things we didn't plan on covering. But at the end of the day, you introduced us to some new concepts and ideas that we've just never considered before, that's valuable to me. So we need to recognize that we can't use a one-size-fits-all strategy and the way we recognize and reward people. And it's one of the big mistakes that companies make is that they use this one-size-fits-all strategy and they wonder why they keep losing particular types of people. And this is where we can get to talking about the culture, but I'll pause right there before we start talking about culture.
I would love to hear more about that, and just go right into it, because I think this is really important information to know.
So, culture, there's a lot of different ways to define culture. And to me, I look at culture as what people think to themselves and what they say to others. I mean, it's really just a very simple, and it really, in some respects, comes back to value. So we talk about people having personalities, but organizations have personalities. And they map actually very nicely to the personality poker framework. So when you look at what's valued, so let's come back to the cards. What's valued? I mean, do we value people that are diplomatic inside the organization, that they're always going to say the right thing? Or do we value people who are going to be critical? Or do we value people who are going to be direct? All these are going to give us different insights into an organization. So one of the ways we play personality poker is to say to people, don't look at yourself, don't even look at your team, look at what does the company value. And typically you can look at what companies value based on their performance reviews, their performance management systems, what gets recognized, what gets rewarded, who gets promoted, who gets bonuses, and you can start painting a picture. And what you'll typically find is that most companies fall into one of four categories. You have the big corporations that are focused on quarterly earnings. So it's all around the numbers. It's about producing, meeting shareholder expectations, every 3 months. And those are club dominant cultures. That means they're all about the numbers, hitting the numbers. That's what matters. But when I've worked with pharmaceutical companies, when I've worked with NASA, and I've worked with other organizations that really value brilliance, PhDs, the people are going to be developing something that has never been considered before, those are spade dominant. And they're going to value the people who have the expertise to be able to create those new inventions. Advertising agencies tend to be diamonds because they're all around those creative ideas and coming up with something new and different. And nonprofits tend to be hearts because they're about the social cause. And what's interesting is if you look at these organizations, they tend to attract people who fit those models, but it's at the expense of everyone else. So if I'm a large corporation and I say, I value innovation, we need to change, but you only measure people on quarterly earnings, you will lose anybody who has any interest on the future, anybody who has interest in innovation. And that's going to be a lot of your diamonds that you'll lose. And so we use this as a diagnostic tool to better understand why they're not able to retain or attract talent and what they need to do to motivate and incentivize people. So it's just so interesting to look at it through that cultural lens, because that gives you some great perspectives on why your organization might not be working the way you think it should.
Awesome. I'm really excited once again to be introducing this in the new year. Tell us a little bit more about, you have a show on your website, Invisible Solutions. Tell us a little bit about what's keeping you busy now.
So Invisible Solutions was a book that came out in March 3rd, 2020, a great day for a book to come out at the very, very beginning of the pandemic. But it was actually timely because the book is how do we solve difficult problems? And so the book's mantra basically became, how do you solve difficult problems during difficult times? And the premise of that book, the key premise of that book is, in order to find better solutions to problems, you need to stop looking for solutions. You don't want answers, you want questions. And the reason why people have a difficult time solving problems is because they're not asking the right questions up front to help them make sure they're even solving the right problem in the right way. So that's a big part of my work. I have a podcast called Invisible Solutions. We have a series of tools that we've developed around Invisible Solutions. That's been a big part of my work for the past couple of years, and it builds on everything I've done for the past 25 years. And if you map that back to personality poker, just, that book really fits into the sweet spot of the spades and the diamonds, because the spades are going to be the ones who have the data, the analysis, be able to look at a problem, reframe a problem. In fact, when we've done some studies at some companies that spend a lot of time reframing problems, the people who are best at it typically are the spades, and diamonds often contribute to that. So each step of the innovation process links back to some piece of work that I've done in the past.
And the podcast is going well. You're doing trainings every week. What's next for Steven Shapiro? Is there anything on the horizon, anything that you're working on behind the scenes that you want to give us a sneak peek at?
Sure. So I'll give you a few sneak peeks. I mean, the first thing is just to say that I'm always working on something. Whether it comes to market is a totally different conversation. So the first thing is that I announced that in 2022, I will be launching my Invisible Solutions Mastermind. And basically what that is in the past, typically I would work with a company. They would bring me in and I would work with them, whether it's to certify their people in my process, whether it's to do a workshop or a keynote. Well, the purpose of the mastermind is to bring people together from different companies and different industries to leverage my process to be able to help everybody in the group learn from each other and to be able to basically be better innovators and better problem solvers. So that's something which is coming out early 2022. The other thing which is coming out in 2022 is a book that I'm working on right now. And most likely, if the book moves in the direction I think it will, it's going to be a prequel to Invisible Solutions. So if you know, like Star Wars, you had Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, and then Star Wars 4 was actually before number 1. This is a prequel. It actually was what happened beforehand. Well, that's what this next book is about, is really Invisible Solutions is all around how can we solve problems. This new book is really about making sure we're solving the right problems. And there's a whole body of work that I've developed over the years that helps you really make sure you're laser focused on what's going to create the greatest value. Instead of solving any problem, how to solve important problems.
So talking about dreams in the Dream Workshop, sounds like you're living the dream quite well, Steven. Is this the dream you envisioned for your life when you were coming out of college? Is this where you thought you'd be at this stage in the game?
You know, I love the word dreams because it's not the word goals. And in 2005, I wrote a book called Goal Free Living. It's on how to live a life without goals. And the premise of it was that you don't set goals, but you rather meander with purpose. You have a sense of direction rather than a specific destination. Then you allow life to unfold. And so, no, I mean, look, I couldn't have envisioned doing some of the things I'm doing right now. Now, I did have in 1996, I said in 5 years, I wanted to leave Accenture, write a book, travel the world, and give speeches. That happened without me doing a plan, without it being a goal. It was just like, it was an intention I put out into the universe. And 5 years later, it's exactly what happened without me doing anything to make that happen. But where I am right now, it's really more just things keep on unfolding and I keep on learning what I like, what I don't like, what works, what doesn't work. What is the market willing to, pay something for it, and where is the market not willing to invest? And that to me is that fine tuning, that navigating, that meandering with purpose means no, I will never know where I'm going until I get there.
Well, it's quite a journey. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've done. I mean, and we could talk on and on and on. You have so many amazing stories, Steven. I love watching you. I love watching your videos and the content, reading your books. I've started listening to the Invisible Solutions as well. It's a great podcast. I'm definitely encouraging my listeners and audience to check it out. Check out the mastermind. Now, is that in person or online? How are you planning to do that in 2022?
Well, we will see what things are like in 2022. The general premise of the mastermind is we have monthly online meetings. The first half of those meetings is me presenting some new concept, new framework, something that the group says they are struggling with. I will present a solution to that as a framework so they can use it. The second half would be hot seats. So that's the virtual part that happens every month. And then the current plan is 2 times a year, people fly down to Orlando, Florida. We hold it in a nice resort here, and we spend 3 days, digging really, really, really deep into your business. And then in between all of that, there's discussion boards and content systems and things like that that people have access to. So that's the general philosophy. But as always, you need to be flexible and see where the world takes you.
Well, it sounds pretty amazing. Sounds like you've got your hands full, but sounds like you're living the dream. I want to thank you so much for joining us on today's show and telling us the insights, the background, the story about personality poker, how it came to fruition, some helpful tips and insights that we can share with our upcoming audiences on the podcast here. And yeah, I want to tell you again that I'm one of your biggest fans, and when I saw this book, it was an aha moment for me. When you say you put something out into the universe, um, I know exactly what you mean. And your book was that for me. When I walked into that bookstore that day, I had been putting it out into the universe. And I was so grateful that you had already created it, because it wasn't something that, with your expertise and experience and knowledge, and the backing of the different universities and colleges that have supported your data, um, in the book. It's it's a phenomenal program, and like I said, I'm just very excited to introduce it, to be training others in it, and to be introducing it to a whole new generation. So once again, Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show today. I hope it's very warm in sunny Florida. It is in the midst of the winter months here in Wisconsin, so we're hoping to stay warm this weekend. Once again, I want to thank our sponsors over at Fox Valley Technical College. If you are interested in opening a business or would like help in starting your business, writing your business plan, check out the Venture Center. Go see Amy Peach and check out the folks that host the eSeed, the Proceed programs. If you are looking into other programs around the country, the eSeed program is a licensed product of Fox Valley Technical College that has also been implemented in universities around the country. So you can definitely check that out. And we thank you once again for sponsoring the A2Z Dreams podcast. We'll catch you next time on the show. And thanks so much for joining us today.